Okay, so today I'm going to share with you 8 questions that you need to answer before starting your freight broker business. So this is all about how to start your freight broker business, how to start your freight brokerage. All right, so question number 1, what is required to become a licensed freight broker? Licensed freight brokers are required to get their freight broker authority through the FMCSA, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. There are a few steps you're going to have to take, but you're going to want to do some research on that. You're going to want to understand what are the steps I have to take to become a licensed freight broker. All right. So you want to start a freight broker business. One of the things you're going to have to do is get your license, get your authority through the FMCSA, but don't sweat it. It's really not that difficult. There's only 3 or 4 things you really need to do in order to become a licensed freight broker and start your freight broker business. Number 2, what freight niche do you want to focus on? Yes, you've heard me say it before. Riches are in niches. Trying to be a jack of all trades, master of none, and trying to serve everybody ultimately means it'll be very difficult for you to serve anybody. So identifying some freight niches, for example, common niches are, the produce niche or other specific products like the steel or building supplies or bottled beverages or the food industry, or maybe you're doing drayage or expedited. I mean, there's all kinds of freight niches out there that you guys can pursue. And I highly suggest you start with one primary niche. Now, the cool part about having a freight niche is that you can always expand beyond that niche later, but you need to understand what your freight niche is, okay? Very, very important. It's one of the most important pieces of advice I can give you and one of the most important questions you can answer before starting your freight broker business, okay? That's number 2. Number 3, what software do you need for your freight broker business? All right, so software has become an important part of every business, and the freight brokerage business is no different, okay? So the reality is there are a couple key softwares you're going to need, but you don't need to break the bank in order to get that software. So perfect example of one of the most important softwares you will need as a freight broker startup is a load board. Typically, the load boards you're going to be talking about are either going to be something like a DAT or an internet truck stop, or maybe like a direct freight or a 123 load board, something like that. There's a whole bunch of load boards out there, and the load boards are really simple. They are basically a hub where brokers and carriers come together to collaborate to help shippers move loads. That's all it really is. Benefits the carrier, benefits the broker, and ultimately benefits the shipper. Okay, so it's an online load board, right? Another thing you're probably going to need, if not truly at startup, but shortly thereafter, is going to be a sales CRM. Okay. Now, a CRM is a customer relationship management tool. It's basically a repository, all of your sales data, like all of the leads that you're calling, all of the notes associated with that, all the contact information, all the quotes you provide. So it's really mainly geared towards prospecting and finding shippers, for your freight broker business. So CRM is something you're probably going to want to do. All right. So that's question number 3, software. There are other software that you can get, but those are probably the 2 biggest. I mean, there are vetting software, there's tracking software, there's all kinds of things, but ultimately those are probably the 2 you're going to need most, right? But you can do some additional research and identify those, okay? Number 4, how are you going to pay your carriers? How are you going to pay the trucking companies that you're hiring to haul your customers' freight? Well, there's really only 2 ways you can do it. You can either have your own financing, meaning you have your own capital, meaning money in the bank. You can have your own credit, which is credit that's established with a bank, or you can use a factoring company. Now, a factoring company is a specialized financing, okay, that allows you to pay your carriers before getting paid by your shippers, right? Because cash flow is king. So you have to identify how you're going to pay your carriers. The majority of the time, most freight broker startups are going to use freight broker factoring, okay? Now, if you're fortunate enough, you have a little bit of a nest egg and you want to leverage that capital so that you can avoid the factoring costs, that's an option too. But this is a question you definitely want to learn. All right. So that's number 4. Number 5, should I set up an LLC, a corporation, or should I do this as a sole proprietor? All right. So every business needs a legal business entity, and it's either a sole proprietor, a corporation, or an LLC. Typically, those are the choices you're going to make. Now, there are pros and cons to both. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not giving you legal advice, but I've been an entrepreneur for over 30 years. And I can tell you with this type of business, I do not recommend a sole proprietorship. Okay. I would strongly suggest that you probably start as an LLC or as a corporation, maybe an S Corp, right? You're going to want to talk to a tax professional. You're going to want to try to get some additional advice on that. But ultimately, you're going to have to figure out what is the legal business entity going to be that you are going to place your business into, particularly from a liability and from a tax standpoint, right? And understand that that corporation or that entity is going to have to file a tax return separate than your personal return, okay? That was number 5. Number 6, ooh, this is an important one. I get this question all the time. Am I going to pursue my business part-time or full-time? Okay, so here's the facts. You can build a successful freight brokerage part-time. You can definitely build a successful freight brokerage full-time, but here's what's not going to happen. You're not going to build a successful freight brokerage in your spare time. And the difference is having a dedicated schedule and a dedicated, committed effort on a regular basis to have the necessary conversations with shippers and carriers and everybody along the supply chain in order to grow your business. Most shipping takes place from 7 a.m. to maybe 5 p.m. That's when you're going to be able to contact most carriers. That's when you're going to be able to contact most shippers. All right. And so ultimately, those are the primary business hours. If you're going to be doing it part-time, you're not going to be able to build it nights and weekends. Typically, you're going to have some time during the day, during the normal business day, in order to make those connections with carriers and shippers and drivers and everybody in between. So if you're doing this part-time, that's fine. That's a great way to start. Maybe you're a truck driver. Maybe you're a truck driver's wife. Maybe you're just somebody who's in logistics, but you work nights. Whatever the case may be, you can start this part-time, but you're going to have some dedicated schedule and dedicated effort. Okay, so that's number 6. Number 7, what is my credit score? Yes, you should check your credit score. You need to identify what is your credit score. You can go to Equifax, or you can go to Credit Karma, or you can go to any of these different places where you can pull your credit report. And what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to identify what is your credit score. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of a guideline, but this is not a hard and fast rule. As a general rule, if you have a 650, ideally 680, maybe 700 credit score, you're going to get approved for a freight broker bond, which is one of the key components in order to get your freight broker license. Okay. So you need to pull your credit and understand what is your credit score. Now, here's the cool part. If you don't have a 650 to 700 or higher credit score, that's fine. My suggestion to you in that case is to start as a freight agent. Now, a freight agent is somebody that isn't required to get a bond, isn't required to have a freight broker license, isn't required to have insurance. They basically work under a licensed freight broker, right, as an independent contractor, and they get typically between 50 and 70% of the profit from any of the loads that they generate. Now, this gives you the advantages and the earning potential of being a broker without all of the back end, without all of the startup and financial obligations. Okay. So if you want to be a broker, understand what your credit score is. But again, if you don't have great credit, you can still start as a freight agent. Matter of fact, I'll put it up here on the screen somewhere where I did another video where you can get started as a freight agent for under $300. Okay. So you can check that out later. All right. And number 8, should I take a freight broker training course online? Should you take some sort of freight broker training? Should you take an online freight broker training program before you start your freight broker business? That is up to you, but I can tell you that I've had over 10,000 students go through my Freight Broker Bootcamp online training program. Many of them have went on to build 6 and 7 and even 8-figure businesses because it gives you the roadmap, it gives you the blueprint, it gives you the answers, and it helps you to avoid mistakes before you hit those bumps in the road. So again, you can always check that out at freightbrokerbootcamp.com. Again, we've had over 10,000 students go through that program, and we offer a 60-day, 100% unconditional money-back guarantee. The feedback has been amazing. The cool part is that you can start with that freight broker training before you go out and invest all that money to really understand if this is something that you truly want to do, right? Are you really going to enjoy the type of work? You're going to learn a day in the life of a freight broker. You're going to learn what's the cost associated with starting your freight brokerage. You're going to learn all the other components of what you need in order to start a freight broker business. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. Listen, if you did, make sure you hit the like button. And once again, you can check out, if you're curious about becoming a freight broker, check out freightbrokerbootcamp.com. Trained over 10,000 students. And ultimately, we are the most cost-effective and comprehensive online freight broker and freight agent training program available. Check that out at freightbrokerbootcamp.com.